Razer's Blade 15 is the best built gaming laptop that I've tested all year. Seriously, the build quality of this thing is on another planet compared to the competition. Unfortunately, this does come at a higher price, as well as other negative trade-offs. So let's go through all the good and bad parts to help you decide if this is a gaming laptop worth buying. My Blade 15 has Intel's Core i9-12900H CPU, Nvidia RTX 3080 Ti graphics, 32 gigs of DDR5 memory, and a 15.6-inch 4K 144Hz screen, but there are also lower spec options for less money. You can check out all configurations and current prices with the links below the video. As is always the case with Razer's laptops, the solid metal CNC aluminum chassis feels excellent. Easily the best build quality as far as Windows-based gaming laptops are concerned. We've still got the black anodized finish and green Razer theme with the lid logo that lights up, and you can use the software to change the lid between static, breathing, or off. The black finish is a massive fingerprint magnet, but I also found it fairly easy to clean with a microfiber cloth. The front has a little indent in the middle, which makes it easy to open the lid, and it goes back about 125 degrees, which felt fine for viewing. The hinge motion feels nice and sturdy, and it makes a satisfying snap sound when the lid closes. There's not a whole lot of flex to the metal lid, but while doing this, I did notice that the rubber feet underneath don't seem as grippy compared to a lot of other laptops. This was never an issue in practice, so it doesn't actually slide around unless you give it some force. There's only a little flex to the keyboard area when pushing down hard. Again, perfectly sturdy during normal use thanks to the metal build. The laptop alone weighs 2.1 kilos or 4.6 pounds, and goes up to just under 3 kilos or 6.5 pounds with the 230 watt power brick and cables for charging included. Combined with the smaller and thinner size, it's very portable for a 15-inch machine considering the specs inside. The Blade 15 has a MUX switch, which means we can disable the integrated graphics and get a speed boost in games after a reboot, but at the expense of worse battery life. The 15.6-inch screen has a few different options available, and at this size, honestly, I think the 1080p or 1440p options would be much better than my 4K configuration. My 4K 144Hz panel does not have G-Sync, but the 1440p 240Hz one does, and that 1440p configuration is also the only one that has advanced Optimus support. My 8-bit screen has an excellent color gamut, but relatively low contrast compared to others. It gets quite bright though. Generally, I want to see at least 300 nits as a minimum, and the 4K screen could achieve this at around 65% brightness, while max brightness could hit 463 nits. In other words, it gets fairly bright. We're looking at a 4.76 millisecond average gray-to-gray response time, which is a great result for a 144Hz panel. There was some overshoot and undershoot though, so it would appear that Razer uses some sort of default overdrive mode to achieve this. I couldn't see any way to turn that off through software. It's doing quite well compared to other laptops, especially for a 4K screen. This is the fastest 4K screen I've tested so far, a little ahead of the 120Hz one in last year's Zephyrus S17, and much faster compared to the 60Hz one in the Aero 17. A lower screen response time contributes to lower system latency. This is the total amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fires on the screen in CSGO, and the Blade 15 was one of the fastest laptops tested in this regard, so looking decent for esports players. Backlight bleed was extremely minor. I never noticed any problems during normal use, but this will vary between laptops. There's a 1080p camera above the screen in the middle, and it has IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock, which I found to work fast and accurately. This is what the camera and microphone look and sound like, and then this is what it sounds like while I'm actively typing on the keyboard. The Blade 15 has a per-key RGB backlit keyboard, and all keys and secondary functions get lit up. You can adjust the brightness through software, or with the F10 and F11 shortcut keys to 15 different brightness levels. More control sounds better, but I found it a bit annoying to press the keys so many times for subtle changes. Lighting and effects are controlled through the Razer Chroma software. Typing felt fine. The keys have a clicky feel despite the key presses not feeling like they go down too far. Despite the power button being right next to delete and backspace, and the fact that Windows 11's default is to put the system to sleep on a power button press, I found that you need to hold it for about half a second before it goes to sleep, so an accidental mispress when typing shouldn't do anything. The gloss touchpad is big, very smooth, and just feels accurate to use. There are front-facing speakers on the left and right sides of the keyboard. However, they don't sound anywhere near as good as the larger Blade 17. I thought the Blade 15s were below average. They get loud enough, but sound tinny with minimal bass, and the latency mon results weren't looking great either. The left has the power input at the back, two USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-A ports, USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, and a 3.5mm audio combo jack. The right has a full-sized UHS-2 SD card slot, Thunderbolt 4 Type-C port, a third USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-A port, HDMI 2.1 output, and Kensington lock. Both the left and right Type-C ports can be used to charge the laptop, but only the right one has Thunderbolt 4 support. Both Type-C ports and the HDMI port also connect directly to the NVIDIA graphics, regardless of whether or not Optimus is on or off. And we also confirmed that the HDMI 2.1 port is capable of running an external 4K screen at 120Hz 8-bit with G-Sync, so variable refresh rate support. There are only 6 TR5 screws to remove to get inside, all of which are the same length. Prying the bottom panel off was easy. This is an uncommon screw type, but the tools I use, linked below the video, were able to take care of it. Inside we've got the battery down the front, 2 memory slots above in the middle, Wi-Fi 6E card on the left, and 2 M.2 slots on the right. Now it kind of looks like there's just one M.2 slot underneath the cover at first glance, but you can actually mount a second drive on top of it for 2 in total. I did however find that you're limited in the drives you can install. This 1TB WD Blue drive worked fine, while my 4TB Team Group drive didn't fit. And this was because it has chips underneath it, which made it too thick. Wi-Fi performance was decent. Killer or Intel options generally seem to do better compared to Realtek or MediaTek options in my testing. I took off half a point from the upgradability score due to the second M.2 slot being limited, and another half a point due to the uncommon TR5 screw type. The Blade 15 is powered by an 80Wh battery. The Razer software gives some control over what happens when running on battery power. The performance mode gets forced into balanced mode when you unplug the charger, but you can also set different keyboard brightness or lid logo lighting based on the charge level. There's also the option to press function and R to swap between 60Hz and 144Hz refresh rates. But unlike ASUS laptops, this doesn't automatically change when you unplug the power. I also noticed that when you use this shortcut to change the refresh rate, it doesn't seem to remember the screen brightness level. Every time I changed it, the brightness ended up dipping to lower than what I had set, which was a little annoying. I found the refresh rate change to almost get us an extra half an hour of runtime in the YouTube playback test. And running with Optimus disabled was much worse as expected, because the NVIDIA discrete graphics eat more power compared to Intel integrated graphics. It's not doing great compared to other laptops, lasting a little less than 5 hours. Interestingly, it's lasting longer than the larger Blade 17 despite that one having a slightly larger battery. Razer's Blade 15 from a couple of years ago was lasting quite a bit longer, while the AMD-based Blade 14 was a little better than that. The power adapter can go in 2 different ways. One of these partially blocks a USB port, so I guess just don't do that if you need it. Now, many of you have made me aware of battery bloat issues that exist in older Razer laptops. Unfortunately, this isn't really something I can comment on because this is a brand new gaming laptop that's like 2 weeks old. So unless the problem is going to present itself in that time, it's just not something that I'm able to test. Unfortunately, I just don't get to test these machines out long term as they go back after the review. Now that said, Razer do now have a dedicated 2-year warranty just on the battery, which I can only assume means that either they've improved the battery or they think it's going to be such a relatively small problem going forward that they're fine to stand behind their product that way. I can't really say, it's just going to be one of those things that we'll have to wait and see about. Let's check out thermals next. The CPU and GPU are covered by a vapor chamber cooler. Cool air comes in underneath, and there are holes for airflow directly above the intake fans. Hot air gets exhausted out the back towards the bottom, and although there doesn't appear to be air exhaust fans below the screen, you'll see soon that this area still heats up. The Razer Synapse software lets us change between different performance modes. We can set balance mode and optionally manually customize the fan speed, silent mode with no additional changes, or custom mode with the option of setting 4 different CPU modes and 3 different GPU modes. You can set these to whatever combination you like, and as we can't test everything, we've chosen to test with both modes set to low, medium, high, and then CPU on boost and GPU on high for full power. The temperatures were fine at idle. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst-case full load scenario. Most applications don't fully load both the CPU and GPU at the same time like this. It was possible to significantly lower the temperatures in balanced mode by manually boosting the fan speed. We're seeing at least an 11 degrees Celsius drop with this simple change. Otherwise, things get progressively warmer in the custom modes as we step up to higher configurations, as you'd expect. Interestingly, the CPU actually gets warmer once we use the cooling pad. However, the GPU lowered by 4 degrees. These are the clock speeds for the same tests just shown. Balanced mode wasn't really changing by boosting the fan because it wasn't thermal throttling, so there's not really any point running it with higher fan speed unless you're paranoid about temps or love louder fan noise. Interestingly, high plus high and high plus boost were reaching about the same clock speeds, despite high plus boost running a little warmer. The cooling pad I test with, linked below the video, was able to significantly boost the CPU clock speeds though. We can see why when looking at the power levels being reached. It looks like the CPU was limited to a 45 watt TDP in either high or boost mode, at least when the GPU is also active. Once there's more airflow though, it seems like the laptop realizes there's more thermal headroom available, so it boosts the CPU power to take advantage of it. Best case, the GPU was running at around 90 watts in this combined workload. However, with the CPU idle, the 3080 Ti can boost up to 110 watts with dynamic boost. In a CPU-only workload like Cinebench though, the processor was able to run at 65 watts in the highest boost mode without a cooling pad. The cooling pad was only needed to boost it up with the GPU also active. Otherwise, the CPU power limits at low, medium, and high were the same as what we saw with the GPU also running in the stress tests. It's not doing great compared to others, because most Intel 12th gen laptops I've tested were able to boost higher than 65 watts in a sustained multi-threaded workload. But to be fair, most of the other laptops are also bigger, which means more space for cooling and higher power limits. The i9 processor in the Blade 15 was still able to offer one of the best single-core results though. The performance drops back a bit when we unplug the charger and instead run purely off of battery power. Despite being a 14-core 20-thread chip, it's now being beaten by other 8-core 16-thread AMD Ryzen options, implying those are more power efficient on battery. The single-core score also lowers quite a bit compared to most other Intel laptops. Though the same thing also happened on the Blade 17, so I guess that's a Razer thing. The keyboard was a little below the usual 30 degrees Celsius of most gaming laptops at idle. With the stress tests going, it gets a fair bit warmer. Balanced mode was similar to silent with the fan just set to automatic. However, it can get a fair bit cooler if we instead manually max out the fan, though it still felt a bit warm. If we instead use custom mode, low plus low was a bit cooler compared to silent mode, which lines up with the temperatures in the stress tests earlier. Medium plus medium doesn't change too much, though the fans don't actually change too much compared to low plus low. High plus high was pretty similar again. The whole chassis feels warmer compared to a plastic laptop at the same temps, as the metal just seems to better conduct heat. High plus boost seemed to be a little warmer in the middle, but the WASD area was cooler as air seems to go through here. Let's listen to the fans. The fans were quiet when just sitting there idle in silent mode. Interestingly, low plus low mode was louder than balanced mode with auto fan, despite low plus low mode running with lower power limits. Max fan speed was hit in the stress tests once the CPU was in high or boost mode, and I found it weird that the fan speed can only be customized in balanced mode. You'd think we would also get this option in custom mode because, well, we're customizing it. Now let's find out how this year's Blade 15 actually performs in games and compares against other laptops. We're going to look at 1080p and 1440p, as these are the resolutions we've got for the purposes of comparing. But check out this video after the review if you want to see how well the Blade 15 actually runs in games at 4K. I mean, there must be a reason that they're offering it with the 4K high refresh screen, right? Cyberpunk 2077 was tested the same on all laptops, and I've got the Blade 15 shown by the red highlight. It's performing about the same as Gigabyte's Aero 16, which also has an i9 processor and similar wattage 3080 Ti. The Aero doesn't have a mux switch, but we're not expecting that to make much of a difference in a GPU-heavy game like this. Anyway, we can see higher wattage 3080 Ti's performing better, but they're also generally in bigger machines. We've got a different selection of laptops at the higher 1440p resolution, as we only test machines that actually have a chance of running it. The Blade 15 and Aero 16 are the lowest 3080 Ti results we've got due to the lower power limits. Many other lower spec GPUs, but with higher power limits, were able to do better. Control is a fairly GPU heavy game, so the mux switch probably doesn't matter much here either, which is likely why again it's close to the Aero 16. It's interesting that the Blade 15 is only 5 FPS or so ahead of last year's Blade 14. However, the larger Blade 17 was quite a bit higher due to the higher GPU power limit. I have also just received confirmation that this year's new Blade 14 is on its way to me, so make sure you're subscribed for that one. At 1440p, the Blade 17 was around 24% higher than the Blade 15 in terms of average FPS. Quite impressive given both technically have the same RTX 3080 Ti graphics. Again, it comes down to the power limit differences, and the Blade 17 can run its GPU with higher power as it has more room for cooling. Red Dead Redemption 2 was tested with the game's benchmark tool. There's only a 9% boost from the Blade 17 in this one, though the Blade 15 could still get beaten by lower GPUs that have higher power limits, such as the 3070 Ti in MSI's GP66 or Lenovo's Legion 5i Pro. The Blade 15 is still performing well in this game at 1440p at around 80 FPS with high settings, but we've also tested it with 10 games in total using features like DLSS, FSR, and ray tracing at all setting levels and 4K. You can check out that video linked in the description after this review. Here are the 3D Mark results for those that find them useful. Now for some content creator tests. Adobe Premiere was tested with the Puget Systems benchmark, and the Blade 15 wasn't doing well here compared to others. It's around 100 points behind the larger Blade 17 with higher power limits. Granted, that also didn't do as well as I was expecting based on the specs. Adobe Photoshop, on the other hand, was doing quite well. This test seems to benefit from single-threaded CPU performance, and as we saw earlier in the Cinebench test, the i9 processor is able to do well here. I'd expect the Blade 17 to be higher in this test if it had an i9 too. DaVinci Resolve is more GPU heavy, however, like the games, the lower powered 3080 Ti was being beaten by lower tier GPUs with higher power limits. Granted, even the Blade 17, which does have a much higher GPU power limit, wasn't that far ahead compared to other laptops. We've also tested SpecViewPerf, which tests out various professional 3D workloads. Intel 12th Gen supports faster PCIe Gen 4 storage, and although the read speeds were excellent, the write speeds were consistently poor, lower than what I'd expect from even a SATA SSD. The UHS-2 SD card slot was doing fine, but I've seen double the speed on other laptops. The SD card clicks in and sits most of the way into the machine, so no snapping your card with an accidental bump. The BIOS might not be as modern looking compared to other brands like ASUS, MSI, or Lenovo, but the core basic functionality is still present, though there's nowhere near as much customization compared to others like MSI's advanced BIOS. Linux support was tested with Ubuntu 22.04. By default, out of the box, the keyboard, touchpad, speakers, and camera work. Wi-Fi didn't work, but it probably just needs a driver installed. The keyboard shortcuts for screen brightness, keyboard brightness, and volume adjustment all worked. Let's discuss pricing and availability next. This will of course change over time, so refer to those links below the video for current prices and sales. At the time of recording, Razer's 12th Gen Blade 15 seems to start at $25 $500 US for the 3060 configuration, while the higher spec 3080 Ti option I've tested in this video seems to be $4,000 US. So quite a difference, but there are a few options in between. Those higher spec configurations definitely aren't cheap, but Razer isn't exactly known as being a budget-friendly brand. The fact is, you've just got to pay more money for that more premium design. And in that regard, they're kind of the Apple of the Windows gaming laptop space, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if you want a nice feeling, well-built laptop. Anyway, let's conclude by summarizing the good and bad parts of Razer's Blade 15 to help you decide if it's a gaming laptop worth buying. Gaming performance was decent considering the size of the laptop. However, there's no doubt at all that you can get more FPS from cheaper but thicker laptops with lower specs. The Blade is on the thinner and lighter side. That's kind of its whole thing. The trade-off for a more portable size is lower power limits. Not everyone values the best possible performance while making other compromises, such as a thicker machine, to get it. And to be fair, with the power limits that Razer do have configured here, the machine doesn't actually run too hot. But yeah, it's also the main reason why other similarly spec'd laptops generally do perform better. Honestly, for gaming, I think getting it with the 1440p screen is probably the best option, because that comes with both Advanced Optimus as well as G-Sync. Two things that this 4K option and the 1080p configuration do not have. G-Sync will just mean no tearing in games when Optimus is off, because with Optimus on, you can run with Adaptive Sync with any of the Blade 15 configurations. And of course, Advanced Optimus means that you don't actually have to reboot the machine to swap between Optimus on and Optimus off. Also, at 15 inches, 4K just seems like a bit of a waste, unless maybe you're doing content creator work or something else like that. Maybe if it was the larger 17-inch model, but even there, I think 1440p still looks perfectly fine. It's no wonder that Razer only sells the Blade 15 with the 4K screen with the RTX 3080 Ti graphics. So yeah, if you are looking at the 1080p or 1440p configuration, you don't have to spend as much on the GPU, because you just don't need as much power to run that. Again, if you do want to see the 4K game benchmarks from this laptop, then refer to the link in the description. Otherwise, the battery life wasn't particularly amazing, and the slow write speed on the SSD was concerning. Although the machine feels solid and looks great, as I noted in the Blade 17 review, definitely expect some silver dings in the black finish over time, as aluminum is just a softer metal. It would also be nice if the refresh rate automatically changed to 60Hz when you unplug and run on battery, like what Asus does, as it just makes the laptop run longer. So if you've got a lot of money and want a well-built machine but don't necessarily need the best performance around, Razer's Blade 15 could be worth considering. You can check out how well the Blade 15 performs in 10 games at 4K, 1440p, and 1080p in this video next. So basically, you can see how well it actually does in games at all 3 different screen resolutions you can buy it with. Definitely check that one out to find out if the Blade 15 can actually run games at 4K.